Welcome back, everybody, to the Renaissance Feudalism podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Riley. In today's episode, I will be discussing Japanese political culture and how it successfully transitioned from being a feudal society with a feudal political system, then an imperial system, and finally the thriving democracy which Japan is today. Japanese political culture can manage competing local interests and work for society's betterment without the hypocrisy that plagues the Chinese political system, which has been Japan's most significant neighbour. Local authority figures can significantly influence the Japanese political and cultural system. It is known that local authority figures have more significant say in decision making. For the Japanese, they govern by consensus. The government by consensus has been the norm of Japanese politics that predates the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate, which ruled Japan from 1603 until 1867. To understand the Japanese political system, it is necessary to understand the influence of Confucian thinking and how the Japanese family structure have worked through Japanese society. In Japan, unlike in China, the head of the household, the father, is still the center of authority. In Japanese culture, second sons and other family members are encouraged to pursue excellence even if it challenges father's status. Sons are encouraged to start their family line separate from the elder brothers. Their success is seen as the greatest success of the whole family. This diversion of thinking is prevalent in Japan, which allows governing responsibilities in regions which the Chinese, have never been able to accomplish due to the fear of internal divisions and rebellions within the cultural and government systems. Japan during the Edo period, again 1603 to 1868, Japan had a feudal system very similar to Europe. Unlike in Europe, the Tokugawa shogunate maintained peace and security due to consensus, and the local daimyos and their samurai retinue were free to govern their local areas as they saw fit. Due to the nature of its political and cultural system, Japan also lacked central figures to be the driving force of public policies and decision makings, making its democracy hard to understand for outsiders because decision making in Japan is built upon consensus. Japan will not have figures like the charismatic American presidents Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, or John F. Kennedy. Furthermore, political cabinets and political leadership within Japan are often led by former Japanese civil servants, making Japanese politics incredibly consensus orientated. It is this culture which is the reason why the Japanese Emperor Hirohito, after World War II, was never convicted of war crimes or crimes against humanity because there was no individual responsible for Japanese actions throughout World War II. The more infamous of these actions were the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 and the rape of the city of Nanking in China. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East, or the Nanking Crimes Tribunal, stated that the death toll in the Nanking massacre was ranging from 200,000 to 300,000 people. Within Japanese political culture, it is practically impossible for anyone to be targeted with responsibility for wrongdoing. Uh, Due to any success is also a collective success as well for the entire society. And any failure is a collective failure, and that's why again the Americans couldn't actually prosecute people in Japan like they could do in Europe because there's no central figure. The overall society regards to the political society and how the society functions as a unit. Decision making more sensual. That was throughout the whole of Japanese society, and that was again why it could transform itself from a feudalistic society into a nationalistic, imperialistic society with into democracy because society is governed and managed through consensus. The Japanese response to colonialism, imperialism, and industrialization from Europe was to emulate those Western powers to modernize Japan and turn that nation into a regional power in the Far East, protect themselves from being targeted by other expansionist powers. The Japanese were able to do this due to, again, their culture, being one that pursues excellence, meaning that their society is highly competitive and there is a willingness to change the current ruling order to improve. The samurai class within Japan were quickly able to transition from being samurai who were also scholars, industrialists, administrators, and other activities necessary to pursue a Japan that would become a modern industrialized and meet the challenges of the rest of the world. During the Tokugawa shogunate from 1603 to 1867, Japan was mainly at peace, and that meant the samurai warrior class within Japan, under the leadership of the shogunate and the daimyos, who were regional rulers, transitioned from being warriors into administrators and business owners. To the restoration of the Japanese imperial monarchy during the Meiji Restoration in Japan, the political revolution in 1868 brought about the final demise of the Tokugawa shogunate, thus ending the Edo Tokugawa period in 1603 to 1867, and at least nominally returned control of the country to the imperial rule of the Emperor Mushitsu. That's Emperor Mama, U for Ugly, T for Tango, S for Sugar, U for Ugly, H for Halo, I for India, T for Tango, O for October. What triggered the change in internal politics in Japan was the Americans' expedition to Japan on July the 8th, 1583, where American Commodore Matthew Perry, led his 4 ships into the harbour of Tokyo Bay. The expedition goal was to re-establish trade with Japan, which had been closed off to the rest of the world in regards to international trade for over 200 years, and to reopen trade between Japan and the rest of the world. Japan's political and cultural reformation was not genuinely revolutionary to their lives because the political culture remained the same. The samurai classes and the daimyo within Japan did not raise against the process of industrialization. In Japan, Japan in its politics is very much governed by consensus and competitiveness that works well with the contradictions. And previously in Japan, competition took place between the rival daimyos. In an industrialized Japan, competition transformed into competition with the rest of the world. We can transform Japan into a nation state where Japan had to compete with other nations for survival. To World War II in 1945 and the American occupation of Japan from 1945 to 1952, Japan quickly transformed itself into a thriving democracy because that was the wish of the United States. There is consensus in Japanese culture for fulfilling the wishes of the highest authority, but all seem to address the local concerns by having a consensus. The Japanese culture of consensus and trying to put forward policies that represent the whole of Japan, but also policies that meet the needs of local politics, is the reason why the Japanese political culture have been able to transform rapidly from a feudal system, imperial system, and finally Japan's thriving democracy in the mid 20th century so quickly. Thank you for this podcast. I hope you found it informative and informational. Again, thanks for listening. Peace out.